Welcome to webinar number 2. So welcome back to those of you who were here last week for the introductory webinar with Sam, where he looked at introducing the idea of a digital showcase. And any of you who weren't at the webinar last week or haven't seen the recording, it's worth getting on to the Not So Different site and having a look at it there, because the recording is there. So this is really weird for me. I want to say that. My name is Adrienne Hayes, for those of you who haven't met me before. Some of you will have met me on the STEPS program, or one of the STEPS programs we did last year in the Hub. And actually, really interestingly, we were supposed to be running the STEPS program this week. But events have taken over and that's not happening. One of the reasons why this is weird for me is because I'm not used to doing this. I am not used to sitting in front of a camera without props, without sticks and handcuffs and juggling balls and all sorts of props to help me show you some of the concepts or bring them to life in some shape or form. So I want you to be patient with me this week. So I'm a bit out of my comfort zone. And I'm sure, like a lot of people, maybe we're all a bit out of our comfort zone in this time. And they say the first thing you should do, and I believe I can take control of this, the first thing they say that anyone should do is say a little bit about yourself to make yourself credible. So one of the things I learned last week through Sam's webinar is the importance of your story. And up to now, when I'm telling my story, when it comes to any of the facilitation work that I do, it's usually just around the facilitation and how I got there. But actually, when I was thinking about my story, it's bigger than that. And I tried to find a photograph that I would be happy to share with you. And because we're in the middle of a pandemic, I don't normally look like this. I normally have eyebrows and I normally have my hair done and I normally have stuff done. But I found one photograph, and this photograph here means a lot to me because this is the last photograph I had taken with my whole family together, and that's New Year's Day. It's on a beach in Vancouver where my daughter was coming towards the end of a 2-year stay there. So I suppose in terms of who I am, I think I've been changing that for the last couple of weeks, given the situation. I grew up in Dublin, in North Dublin, so you will hear the flat north side Dublin accent. And when I get a bit excited, I tend to talk a really bit fast. So for those of you who aren't understanding me, just throw something out to say, slow it down, Adrienne. Grew up in Finglas South. I was the shy kid in the family. You know the way our parents lovingly give us labels? Well, I got that one, the shy kid. I got involved very early in community and voluntary work through an organisation called the Peace Corps. And at 16, I was leading the weekend Meals on Wheels service for an elderly population in the Liberties in Dublin city centre, where my heart belongs. I grew up in Finglas, but my heart belongs in the Liberties. And then because I was involved in all sorts of voluntary work, I became the youth representative on many projects, committees, management groups in Finglas and in the inner city too. You can tell by looking at me that I'm no longer a youth representative anywhere. I've grown up a little bit since then and aged a little bit since then. And then I don't actually remember making a conscious decision, but I found myself getting into youth work. So I trained as a youth worker and became a youth worker. I was a youth worker in Finglas South for about 10 years. And then the Celtic Tiger was sort of booming away. And at that point, I decided to move from youth work and go to a place in Kilbarrack in a project, which was a second chance education project for young people who'd left school early. And it was a real eye opener for me because in Finglas, when I was working as a youth worker, we had 2 youth workers and 300 young people. And then when I moved to Kilbarrack, we had 7 workers and 15 young people. So we fell over ourselves trying to find a young person to work with. And at that point, one of the benefits to that project was I had loads of money. And I had loads of money to send staff on training because it was a pilot program to look at what works and what doesn't work. And one of the training I did was with the Pacific Institute, which is a global organization. And I did their Investment in Excellence program. Effectively, it's a mindset program. It looks at how our mindset works and gives some techniques to change that. And that sort of changed my life a little bit. or a big bit, because once I'd done the program, I decided I didn't want to be the shy kid anymore. I was a shy adult at that stage. Um, and once I made a decision not to be shy, then the work I did with the Pacific Institute, or the training I did with the Pacific Institute, gave me some techniques and tools to help me make that happen. And so for the last 20 years, I've worked with the Pacific Institute, facilitating their programs. I've been doing that all over the place. I sort of feel sometimes like a footballer might feel, doing something you love, with people you love doing it with, except for the big, huge salary, of course. So I've been very lucky in the last 20 years to do what I do with groups and organizations and individuals that range from people in business, in companies, senior managers, people on the shop floor, to working with people who are maybe socially disadvantaged. I work in the prisons. I work in drug projects. I work with people who are unemployed, trying to get back onto the employment ladder. I work with young people who want to be community leaders. So one of the things that shows me is we're all sort of the same. We tend to have the same sort of, you know, these are the things I know I can do, and these are the things I know I can't do, and the same sort of criticisms of ourselves. So that's a little bit about me. So what I want to do now is throw it over to you. Here's a way of introducing yourself. So I want you to tell me your name, your current energy levels on a scale of 1 to 10. So if you're 1, it's like meh. And if you're 10, it's woohoo. And one word to describe your mood. Have a think. What has been your win of the week? So we've had energy levels ranging from 0 to maybe 7 or 8, and then a few people in the middle. So you can tell where energy levels are at, and not surprising, given what's going on at the moment. But if you were to stop and think, over the last week, what has been your win of the week? So what has been the one thing, or you might even have more, that's got you through the week where you went, okay, this has happened, and it's happened, and I got through it, or it's happened and I did it really well. For my win of the week this week is probably starting to understand how this technical stuff works. So I've spent a fair bit of the week on Zoom, and then a bit of time on this with Sam, learning how to use it. So my win of the week is I'm starting to recover, or to feel like I'm winning technology. So just take a couple of seconds, have a think about it. If you have a pen beside you, write it down. If you haven't got a pen, just think about it. And the reason why I asked that question is because often what we tend to do is we focus on, it's a bit of a, if I can use this word, it's a bit of epoxy time at the moment with all that's going on. And when we're in the middle of a pandemic, because let's face it, none of us have ever been in the middle of a pandemic before, it's one of those things where you're trying to figure a way, you're trying to make sense of the world, the new world. And what can tend to happen to us is we start to focus on everything that's wrong. When we start to focus on what our win of the week is, something very strange happens inside of us where we start to notice other wins of the week. So if we're not purposely deciding to go out ourselves and find things that are good, or to record things in our subconscious mind that are good, then what we tend to do is we tend to go to the default, which is quite often what didn't go well this week. So we're going to look at that again soon. I'm going to come back from the fold. I'll go back to the fold in your arms thing, because I was trying to think of ways of engaging you guys that I would do if we were in a room together. But given that we're not in a room together, I want you to try this. So where you're sitting, fold your arms. So just as you would do. if you were at home in the evening or watching the television. And it's probably how you folded your arms since the time you were 2. Either your parents or your grandparents or somebody did that too. Now what I want you to do is fold your arms in the opposite direction. What's that like? What most of us do is we feel weird doing it the opposite way. So we want to go back to the way that it's always been. And here's the thing about it, and that's because we are creatures of habit. We tend to do the same things over and over again. We get used to doing it one way. We all have the potential to be comfortable doing it both ways. We would just have to practice it and practice it and practice it and practice it. And I sort of think that's a bit like life is at the moment. We got used to doing it one way, and now we've been thrown out of our comfort zone, our pandemic comfort zone. And it's a bit like that. We're going to have to find ways to get used to doing things in a different way. And there's nothing wrong with that either. And I found this on Facebook during the week. It's unattributed because I don't know what genius put this together. But it sort of helped me. So those of you who are feeling a bit meh or a bit fearful, this sort of helped me last week when I was trying to figure out what was going on for me. And I love this bit here where it says, who do I want to be during COVID-19? So we've all been through the fear phase, that fear zone. Hoarding food or toilet paper or medicines, and being angry or fearful, and then moving into the learning zone when we start letting go of things that we can't control. We start to identify our emotions. We start to know that everyone's trying to do their best, and then moving towards the growth zone, where we start to find a purpose, or we show gratefulness, or live in the present and focus on the future. So if you were to describe where you were at the moment, where you are at the moment, would you be in the fear zone, the learning zone, or the growth zone? So it's where I want to be. I want to be in the growth zone. And here's what I found for the last week. I was in the fear zone, and then I moved to the learning zone, and then I moved to the growth zone. And then on Monday morning, after having quite a nice weekend, I started to listen to the radio again, and I went straight back to the fear zone, because I was listening too much to the stuff that's not going well. Self-talk. What is self-talk? Self-talk is an act or practice of talking to oneself, either aloud or silently and mentally. Human beings talk to ourselves all the time. Not always on the outside, although sometimes we do it on the outside too, and we get caught. But on the inside in our head, self-talk is that internal dialogue that goes on in our head. And we talk to ourselves all the time. In this country, 50 years ago, had you admitted to talking to yourself and answering yourself back, you would have automatically been put into what was known at the time as a lunatic asylum, because it was seen as the first sign of madness. Now, scientists know we do it all the time. How many times do you reckon we talk to ourselves in our head a day? Some of you should know this. We have somewhere between 50,000 and 70,000 thoughts a day. And some of them thoughts that go on in my head are random stuff, like must remember to get soap when I go to the shops next time, or did I turn the hairdryer off, or did I unlock the car? Did I lock the car? So some of them thoughts go on in my head. And then some of the other thoughts that go on in my head might sound a bit like this, or look a bit like this. What's wrong with me? How come nothing ever goes right for me? How come no matter how hard I try, it doesn't matter, things just go wrong? How come nobody listens to me? I'll give it a go, but I know it won't work. And here's the thing about our self-talk. We've got 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and we couldn't possibly be aware of them all the time. We just couldn't. We drive ourselves mad. Human beings live their lives according to the thoughts they have about themselves. So here's the thing about self-talk. Some of my self-talk will tell me, all the things I believe I'm good at. So I'm good at this, I'm good at that, I can do this, I can do that. Some of that self-talk tells me the things I believe I'm not good at. I'm not very good at tinting my eyebrows. I'm not very good at lying on in the morning. I'm not very good at sleeping at nighttime. And that self-talk tells me things that I believe you're good at and you're not good at, and that the world is good at and the world is not good at. And human beings live their lives according to the thoughts they have about themselves. So for instance, How many people here blush? So unmute your mic if you know that you take redners. That's what we called them in Finglas when I grew up. So, you know, your face goes red, you get embarrassed and your face goes red. Okay. How many people know who take redners or blush very easily? Know that you don't have to be in an embarrassing situation to go red. You just have to think about an embarrassing situation and you can go red. Because when you're the shy kid, guess what way you act or you behave like the shy kid until you decide it's going to be different. So those of us who know that, know that. So we could be walking down the street and we say to ourselves, I hope I don't meet so-and-so, so-and-so, and your face goes red. Or how many people hate talking in groups? This self-talk stuff, how I talk to myself matters. And here's why it matters, because the thoughts I have in my head control how I act or how I behave. This is a thing called the self-talk cycle. So my self-talk, how I talk or affirm to myself, some of that 50 to 70,000 thoughts I have a day, builds or reinforces my self-image. So if we're being honest, we probably have hundreds, if not thousands, of words we would use to describe ourselves. I'm a woman, I'm a Northsider, I'm tall, I'm small, I like, I don't like, I can, I can't, I believe I should, I believe I shouldn't. That builds my self-image, how I see myself. And then how I see myself controls how I act or how I behave. And ultimately, my performance. And then that performance stimulates positive or negative self-talk. So it becomes a cycle. So if we were to take the one about, you know, getting embarrassed easily. So if my self-talk says I get easily embarrassed, I'm shy, I don't like talking in groups, then I probably see myself as someone who, when it gets into a group discussion, I hold back. I don't push myself forward. And what that does is it controls how I act or how I behave in groups. So how many times have you been in a group, if you are that person who is shy in groups, where you're sitting there and you have something to say and you want to say something, and then in your head you're going, don't say that, that sounds stupid. Don't say that, just don't say it. And then someone else says it and it sounds really clever. And then that just reinforces or stimulates your self-talk positively or negatively. Say, see, that's it, that's me, I just can't push myself enough. So this self-talk becomes a cycle. And quite often what we try to do is we try to change our behavior. But changing behavior can be really hard to do. So in cognitive psychology, they say don't change your behavior. Change how you talk to yourself about your behavior, and your behavior automatically follows. So say, for instance, now, what I'm going to tell you is simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. So if it's a case that you want to be more confident talking in groups, if I describe myself as being confident, so if I start to use my self-talk to tell myself I'm confident, that will start to build my self-image. It'll start to change how I see myself when it comes to doing things. And if I tell myself that enough, then what happens is I become it. So, you know that saying, a lie told often enough becomes the truth. If I tell myself enough times that I am confident when it comes to groups, I like to have my say, I talk up when I have something to say, then I start to build my self-image and I see myself feeling more confident. And then that controls how I act or how I behave. And then the more I do it, it stimulates positive self-talk. So I'm sort of shortcutting a lot of this stuff because there's a whole piece behind what happens when in our mind when we make decisions and when we decide we want things to change. But effectively, what I do want to talk to you about is how important self-talk is. And here's the thing about our self-talk, because we've 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day, it's hard sometimes to know what's going on in my head because I behave automatically. And if I was to say to you, don't think of a big, red, bouncy ball, how many people have just thought of a big, red, bouncy ball? Now, here's the reason why. I told you not to think of a big, red, bouncy ball, and here's the reason why we think of a big, red, bouncy ball. Because human beings think in pictures. So the words I use give me a picture, and then that picture gives me a feeling or emotion. And there is no picture for don't. So when I say don't think of a big red bouncy ball, you don't get a big red bouncy ball in your head and an X going through it. What we actually get is a big red bouncy ball. It's often why we tell small children not to run across the road, and the first thing they do is they run across the road. Or we tell small children, don't jump in the puddle, and their little brains are going, oh, puddle, 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 puddle. And for anyone who likes Father Ted, you'll remember that episode with Dougal where he was told not to press the red button, and he can't help it. He has to press the red button. So here's the thing about the word don't. When I use the word don't, I can't see that. So when I hear myself sometimes saying, don't get embarrassed, don't go mad, or even when someone says to us, don't look now, but what's the first thing we do is we look. So we're going to start to look at language and the language we use and ask ourselves the question, is the language that I use, because that's all the thoughts that's all the thoughts are in my head. My thoughts are words and words are language. Are the words I use bringing me towards something, or are they taking me away from it? So in other words, are they useful or not useful? So here's something I want you to try for the next 24 hours. It's an exercise to get you to become more aware of some of those 50 to 70,000 thoughts you have a day. For the next 24 hours, I want you to play a game of no put downs. Now, you all know what a put down is. No put downs of yourself or no put downs of anyone else for 24 hours. So, you know that thing we do sometimes where we go, typical, what else could I expect of myself? Or, sure, look, I knew it wouldn't work. Or, sure, I'm useless. No put downs of yourself or no put downs of anyone else. Now, anyone else, by the way, includes politicians, it includes Gardaí, it includes that bloody pandemic, it includes that woman next door who drives you mad, it includes our parents or our kids or our husbands or wives, whoever's driving us mad at the moment, for 24 hours. And the reason why we're doing it is this. First of all, you're going to find that it's actually quite difficult to do. The second thing you're going to find is you probably put yourself down far more than you put anyone else down. And then the third thing you're going to find is that it's really, really hard to stay on track. But you're going to become so aware of some of that 50 to 70,000 thoughts you have a day. And I want you to be asking yourself the question, is my thought about that thing in my life useful or not useful? And if it's useful, keep it going. So for instance, it's not about being positive or negative, because if I break my arm and I pretend it's not broke, that's actually not very useful. It might be positive, I might be thinking positive, but it's not very useful. But is that thing I'm thinking about in that area of my life lead me towards something good, or is it leading me away from something good? Is it leading me towards getting something I want, or is it stopping me from even trying? So no put downs of yourself or anyone else for 24 hours, just try it. When you hear yourself putting yourself down, like, oh, how could I be so stupid? I want you to give yourself a really simple instruction. And the instruction is stop. Stop. Now, I use the stop sign because I'm a visual sort of person. So you might have done something stupid. You might have let someone say something to you. You might have felt, that you could have acted better or differently or been more productive in a certain area. It's okay. Tell yourself it and then say stop. And then follow that up by saying to yourself the next time. So I might have let someone say something to me and let them away with it. The next time, I'm not going to put myself in that situation. The next time, I'm going to make sure I stand up for myself. The next time, I'm going to walk away. The next time, I'm going to stay calmer. So what we're doing is we start to take control of the 50 to 70,000 thoughts I have a day. Because here's the thing about that self-talk. If I don't control my self-talk controls me. Want to give you an exercise for next week? Actually, I should go back. No, I'll take questions in a few minutes, but I want you to be thinking about this, an exercise that I want you to be thinking about between now and next week. 3 things that went well today. So every night when you're lying in bed, how many people do this thing where they lie in the bed and they go, I shoulda, woulda, coulda? So here's the thing we're going to start doing. We're going to start getting ourselves into the habit of training our self-talk. So when you're lying in bed tonight, I want you to say to yourself, ask yourself a question. What are the 3 things that went well for me today? And you just have to list them. You don't have to go through them again or analyze them or overthink them. 3 things that went well for me today. And they can be simple things. So it's not the big rocket science stuff. It can be, had a good conversation with a friend on the phone. Had a nice dinner. I got my bed made, even if that was just before I got into it. Or I cleaned out that cupboard I swore I would do. Can be anything at all. 3 things that went well for me today. And then you're going to ask yourself a question. What's the 3 things I'm looking forward to tomorrow? And here's the reason why. If we give ourselves something to look forward to, we're telling ourselves to go and get it. So the 3 things I'm looking forward to could be having a lie on in the morning, or having a good night's sleep, or I'm going to ring my granny, or I'm going to get that piece of work done that I said I was going to get done. And here's something I want you to be paying attention to. What are the 3 new things I want to learn? So between this week and next week, if I was to think of 3 new things I want to learn, and that can be things about me, things I want to learn about myself, or things I want to learn for me. One of those things is to be better at using technology. And this way, we're starting to give ourselves goals. So we're starting to look and ask ourselves the question, what went well for me today? So I start to acknowledge that things do go well. 3 things I'm looking forward to. So I start to think about the future, and 3 new things I want to learn. 24-hour exercise, give you an opportunity to see what's that self-talk going on in your head. Priming myself at nighttime, 3 things that went well for me today, helps me to get a good night's sleep, thinking about the things that went really well. And here's what you're going to find. You're going to find that when it comes to doing it tomorrow, you're going to find 3 new things. And then when you do it the next night, you're going to find 3 new things. 3 things I'm looking forward to, and 3 new things I want to learn. Now, I'm going to show you why that happens. So here's how important words are. The words I use tell me what to look for. So we might have seen the dog of that. Can you see the dog wasn't there? But because that was there, it tells our brain what to go and look for. And then an amazing neuron at the base of our brain called the reticular activating system. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of weeks' time. Its job is to find what I'm looking for. Can you find 10 faces in the tree? Well, here's what I wanted to demonstrate with this particular image. Words are really important. The words I use give me an instruction. When it says, can you find 10 faces in the tree? As soon as we know we're looking for faces, then we start to find faces. When do we stop looking for faces? When we've found the 10. This is how goal setting works. I need to tell myself exactly what I'm looking for. And when I know exactly what I'm looking for, and I use my self-talk to find it, to tell myself to go after it, then I'll find it. I think I've one more of these. Oh, I love this one. Sometimes in life, when we can't find what we're looking for, what we do is we ask someone to help. So we need to know what we're looking for. We use our self-talk to tell us to go after it. If we find it, our reticular activating system, and we'll talk a little much more about that in a couple of weeks' time, that starts to find it for me because it now knows what it's looking for. And then when I can't find it, I ask someone for help, because that's a bit like life, isn't it? We're not going to know the answer ourselves all the time. We will ask other people for help. If I know what I'm looking for, then I see it. But if I don't know what I'm looking for, then what I tend to do is recreate everything I've ever done before. So this is where self-talk is so powerful. What am I saying to myself? Is the self-talk working for me or against me? How can I control my self-talk? What is it I want? And how can I use language, the words that I use to myself to get me to where I want to be? Brené Brown said we should talk to ourselves like you would to someone you love. Because one of the things I sometimes notice about myself is that anybody spoke to me the way I speak to myself, I wouldn't allow. Sometimes we can be our worst enemies. Just before we go into next week's webinar, there's a couple of things. You all know that Shan and Tony and Kerry and Adele are around to support you. If you want to link in with them, they're still around. They're working from home because that's what everybody does in a pandemic. They work from home and they've got themselves nice and settled there now. So if you do need you need support from them, you know where they are. Equally, you know where Sam is. And Deirdre has asked me to throw out an idea to the group, and here's the idea. I was trying to find, you know, that people may have seen it, that illustration of the boat with the hole in it, and there's guys down the end of the boat where the hole is, and they're buckets and they're trying to throw the water out. And in the other end of the boat, the guys there are going, thank God the hole is not on our end. That whole idea of, we're all in this together. So Deirdre has asked me to throw this out as an idea or a suggestion to you guys. Because one of the things I love particularly about Brené Brown, I don't know if people know her, she's really good. She talks a lot about vulnerability, and she talks a lot about the importance of human connection. So is there a possibility that you guys would be interested, or some of you might be interested in looking at how you could maybe become a support for each other? So whether that's in a practical term where you're supporting each other as you move towards the digital showcase in a couple of weeks' time, or even in terms of support each other in other ways as well. Have a think about that. If anyone would like to be part of a small group of people who may do a little bit of training to do some peer support or peer mentoring, give Deirdre a shout. And then next week's webinar, actually, the best person to describe next week's webinar is probably Sam. Sam, do you want to jump on and talk about next week's webinar?
I will indeed. And first off, I'd like to commend you on rolling with some technical difficulties. We did a practice session yesterday and we didn't have any issue with the chat or anything like that. And you managed to superbly, I would say, factor things in and have an excellent session. So I think you've done. It's been absolutely inspirational for myself. Anyway, so basically next week's session, where I suppose each of these weeks is building on each other. So there's kind of natural linkages between what I talk about and what Adrienne talks about. Specifically next week, and it's something I think a number of you were touching on in the first session we had, is around how do I take an idea and how do I turn that into something real? So what I'll be really focusing on with you next week is kind of a creative process. Now, everyone's creative process is different, but we'll be using kind of one that's quite famous. It was developed in Stanford in their design school. But we'll be looking at how we can all kind of have our own sort of creative process and kind of, once again, taking idea from that thing that's kind of off in the ether or just in our heads, and how do we actually translate that into something on a page, on a computer, or in something we make physically. How do we do that? So that's the focus of next week's session.
So just before we finish up, can I ask you all to tell me your energy levels where you're at now? Thanks a million, guys. I'm feeling like a 10 now because I'm so relieved this is over. I'm looking forward to next week's with Sam and looking forward to the week after. Have a great week, lads.